All right.
the idea I wanted to float past was something that's been coming up a few times, and something that came up a lot last year actually in Colorado. Um, was as someone working in a school, especially as a teacher, and now especially as a headmaster, um, like what is how much is fair? How much time is fair to allot for family time, um, in
You mean
terms
like,
of homework?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because
Yeah.
something that came up a lot last year in Colorado was that it was a policy uh, um, that teachers could not uh, were strongly discouraged from giving homework over the weekend. Um, if you were to assign uh, an assignment to be due on Monday, um, it had to be the students had to be given notice like way ahead of time, like at least 2 weeks ahead of time. Otherwise, you weren't allowed to assign anything on Monday. It had to be done, or it had to be assigned, due Tuesday or something, so that the students would be discouraged from doing work over the weekend, so that they could spend that time with their family. Another way that it was spun was that so that they could catch up on the work that they had gotten behind on throughout the week. Um, but it also ended up getting this policy getting expressed in the teachers being prohibited um, from giving homework over breaks. So Thanksgiving break, spring break, Easter break, no homework over any of it. Um, and I think, and yeah, the idea was that family time is sacred, and that um, you know you don't want kids to be doing schoolwork when they could be spending time with their parents and with their siblings and with whoever else. Um, and as the Latin teacher last year, that was really tough because something really essential to Latin, or to acquiring Latin, is practice. You got to do it over and over again. Um, it was tough for the math teacher as well.
Yeah.
Um, and so a topic of discussion that's been brought up to me a couple times now with some of the families here is like, you know, once again, I've been homeschooling my kid, and the time that I've been able to spend with them, we're done doing school stuff by like noon,
Yeah.
and that gives me like the whole rest of the day to just spend time with them, spend quality time with them. How much homework are you going to be assigning to my kid, and are they going to be up until like 9, um, just doing homework, such that I won't be able to spend any time with them. They won't be able to spend any time with the rest of the family. What's the deal with that? And I I don't know. It's a tough. I haven't really been able to come up with a really good answer. The one I have given has been really like non-committal. Um, said like, well, we haven't really it's something we're going to discuss. Blah blah blah.
Mhm.
I've given the sort of very um, tentative time frame of about 1 to 2 hours a night of homework. Um, but I don't. I mean, I don't know how reasonable that is, given because the other thing is that like liberal education or classical education done well is like I think objectively harder, objectively more difficult than the kind of education that they would get from like from a public school or from you know
Hmm.
whatever else, which usually just amounts to just going home and memorizing a bunch of stuff and then coming back and spitting it out.
Yeah.
Um, and it can take time to like grapple with the ideas, and so yeah, I don't know. So what I this has just been something on my mind. But what do you guys think about that?
Well, I don't know, because the first thing you were talking about, like family time or whatever, has been, this is one of those things that sounds to me like it has a basis in a good idea, and then is now starting to go off the rails a little bit, right? Because I mean, obviously, we all know that the parents are just naturally the first educators of their children,
Yeah.
and so there is something to be said for the time that that they should be spending with their parents or with their families or whatever.
Yeah.
But to your point, there are some things that, the question then is what's the purpose of homework, right? Like, why is it assigned? And yeah, I think I would agree that you shouldn't be assigning homework for the sake of assigning homework.
Yeah.
Like you should be assigning homework with the sake of some end, some purpose in mind.
Right.
Like students need such and such a skill, or I want them to master said information, whatever
Be
that
ready
they
to
need.
discuss this. Yeah.
Exactly, right? And sometimes, this, what I'm about to say next, depends a great deal on like the involvement of the parents. Julian, you were talking about liberal education or something like that. When it involves something like literature, right? Not necessarily like Latin, just like Latin has to be drilled, mathematics has to be drilled. I mean, there's just no way around that. If you have a kid that's in a decent home, though, like it might be possible that even his or her parents have read Homer or whatever, and that's something they can talk about at dinner. Like, oh, you're reading the Iliad this semester. Like, I remember reading that way back when. I remember a little bit with it, and you can talk about that around the dinner table. And it's not only homework; it's also quality family time or whatever. I mean, such a thing is possible. I don't know how often it would actually occur. I see Joe's face.
But yeah, because what I was thinking was, I'm very skeptical in general,
and I think you have reason to be.
When Julian's talking to me about the family quality time that these kids are going to be missing with their parents, I'm thinking,
yeah, there is.
What's really what are you really losing? Like, is the kid just going to be angry because he can't play video games or what?
Yeah. Now,
I'm sure there's some families out there that like to sit around the campfire every night and sing songs, but.
And I've met some of those families, but they are few and far between.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Now, like when I was at Jesuit, now this was a high school. Like they were up front. It was in the handbook. It was part of every tour. Like they were just in your face with this. Like you're going to have 3 hours of homework every night. Like it's expected. And if your teachers aren't giving you at least half an hour to an hour's worth of homework in each one of your 5 to 6 classes, then like we're going to have a problem with them too, right? Like they should be assigning you all of this work. And we were expected to do extracurricular activities after school, like it. So when you talk about family time, I don't know, like we were expected. So school ended, let's say 3:00. You were expected to do some sort of extracurricular or sport or club or whatever till like 5. Then you got home. You were supposed to have 3 hours of homework, right? So that puts you like 8, 9 o'clock. Right, and you haven't even had dinner, or that's not even including dinner or any sort of family time yet. But that was just how life was, and then you had to get up at 5 o'clock the next morning and start everything all over again.
Yeah, that's grueling.
We don't produce 40 national merit scholars every year for nothing, but.
All right, Evan's the man who knows. I want to hear Evan on this.
Now, for a middle school and elementary school, like I would expect the number wouldn't be like 3 hours; it would be shorter. But
I don't think parents will tolerate much more than the 1 to 2 hours. However, the child might actually be using that time, right? If I want family time with my child is code for my child will bug me if he doesn't get to play 2 hours of Minecraft every night. You don't have control over that as an administrator, and you just have to play the game, right? I like to think of it the same way that doctors probably have to when they treat their patients. Every doctor who makes a regimental recommendation says, okay, you should do X, Y, Z, and I imagine that the doctor who comes fresh out of med school with all of this knowledge is really hopeful that every single patient he talks to is going to go do it. But over time, you realize you just got to go through the motions. Half the reason you say you have to do all these things anymore, because you know very few people will. Well, you do it maybe in the off chance that the patient's really paying attention and you make a difference. And the other reason you do it is to avoid like malpractice suits. Those are the two reasons that you give the advice the way you do.
Avoid practice what?
Malpractice suits.
Oh yeah.
Lawsuits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do think that the 1 to 2 hour, especially for middle school, especially for homeschool parents. Remember, you're dealing with probably a very different clientele than, say, Phil, the typical family that came to Jesuit, right? They were probably coming from elite or pretty aggressive private schools into another private school setting and looking for more. There's been an influx of homeschool parents and recent homeschool parents. They're not necessarily lifers. They're parents who started homeschooling their kids within the last 3-4 years, had a change of heart in light of all the stuff that's going on. And they got really used to the time that they spend with their kids. And they don't like the idea of juniors spending very little time around them when they're home from work. So I think that just to cover all your bases, you have to say 1 to 2 hours. Now, one way to get around this, if you want guaranteed time for a student to drill, as a student must in, say, math and in Latin, what I did is I just gave every one of my junior high students a study hall every day in my schedule. I just designed the schedule so that they had an hour and 15 minutes of time at school. That wasn't lecture time. It was new information. They were just supervised by a teacher. And it's good to divide junior high kids by gender. Absolutely do that. Or else no one will be able to focus. Guaranteed. Wailing and gnashing of teeth. So I think you have to play according to the rules of the game, and that's with the particular clientele that you have. That's 1 to 2 hours max for junior high kids. But there are ways to extend that homework time. And if the goal is to have a student drilling on his own, and you do acquire different habits if you're expected to really take hold of your own study time, right? You might say, what's the difference between having an hour more class time and having an hour of free study time across all your classes, say? And the difference is that it really is important for a student to have a sense of freedom and then make the right choice and build the habits himself. That's good preparation for high school.
That is
good preparation for college.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents. If you can build it into the schedule, that's 3 hours of homework time now that you've cut down to a maximum of 2 artificially. And parents are happy because Junior isn't doing a ton of homework at home, or at least not doing so much that he doesn't have an hour to spend with the family watching TV or whatever they do.
Yeah. You also didn't have every class every day, right? I think that's helpful too.
Yeah. Ours, we had 7 classes and we took 6 a day, and the bottom one would rotate out, right? So it would just kind of block and then.
Yeah, the schedule that was proposed to me at the school for teaching Latin was actually 3 days a week. But he wants to do like a Monday where all the classes meet, though he's thinking except for Latin, so that his Tuesday through Friday classes can be longer. Right? Because he's thinking if I have my students come in for a 45, 50-minute class period, you spend 5 minutes chilling them down, 5 minutes maybe reviewing, and then the last 5 minutes they're all looking at the clock, getting ready to go. So you really got 30 minutes of class time if you do that. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting idea.
That has been one of the interesting things that, Evan, as you've mentioned in the last 2 years for reasons that I can't really pin down, that people have been rethinking the kind of educational model, whether it's through homeschooling or these like pop-up classical schools that are kind of, happening all over the places. Yeah. Schedules, people are rethinking schedules, coursework, homework, there's this real kind of real imagining going on. And
there's Montessori that's becoming real popular too.
And so some of these are going to be good ideas and some of these are a little weird ideas that are being tried, but I guess whatever works will.
At least
will,
people recognize there's a
uh,
problem.
Yeah.
That's the first step.
Well, whatever works will stick around. Makes a good segue
Yeah.
into a discussion of laissez-faire markets, doesn't it?